Alia is a first-year student popular for her good looks and icy demeanor. Her standards are so high that not even Ando, the most popular boy in school, is good enough for her, so you probably don't stand a chance either. She's seatmates with Q's, who is often sleepy, airheaded, and inattentive. Despite this, she secretly harbors a soft affection for him, often calling him cute in Russian, believing that he doesn't understand her. Unfortunately for her, Q's understands Russian thanks to his grandfather, playing Counter-Strike, and his nightly Duolingo. Q's can't bring himself to tell Alia that he can understand her, as it would most definitely cause her to self-destruct. After class, Alia reprimands Q's for playing a gacha game on his phone, and she becomes jealous when she sees him fawning over the SSR Tsukayomi. She grumbles in Russian that she has silver hair too. Q's has lunch with his two friends Takeshi and Hikaru. They watch as the student council walks in, made up of Alia, the treasurer Masha, the secretary, and Yuki, the head of public relations. All three girls are popular in their own right, but Takeshi believes he has a romantic chance with Yuki. The student council sits at Q's table, though Alia grows jealous when Q's and Yuki bond over their mutual love of spicy food, and when she learns that the two are childhood friends. After Takeshi and Hikaru leave the table, Yuki tries to convince Q's to join the student council, as they once both were in middle school, but he refuses. Later, Alia expresses her surprise that Takeshi has female friends, to which he points out that Alia is his friend too. Alia storms off, but secretly happy that Takeshi considers her a friend. Q's has a dream of a Russian girl he played with when he was younger. He wanted to talk to her so bad that he learned Russian for her, so maybe you should at least text that girl you like how you feel. The next day, after waking up extra early, Q's cleans up the classroom. Alia walks in, and he notices that one of her socks is soaked. She complains that a passing truck splashed water on her. She asks him again if he intends to join the student council, and once more he refuses. Alia takes off her wet sock to change it, but after noticing Q shift around uncomfortably, she uses the opportunity to tease him. She asks him to get one of her spare socks from her locker and to put it on her. She cheekily says that this should be a reward for him, and she sneakily says in Russian that it's a reward for her too. Emboldened, Q grabs her foot and puts the sock on just like she asked. But this proves to be too stimulating for Alia, and a minor scuffle ensues. Alia kicks Q's away, but this results in Q's seeing that which all men dream of seeing. The next day, after admitting to himself that he has a foot fetish, Q's apologizes to Alia for what happened. She forgives him, but when she learns that he caught a glimpse of her underwear, all bets are off. She runs away and Q's gives chase. After 10 minutes, they both get tired. As a peace offering, Q's gives her favorite red bean soup. Alia accepts, and in Russian, offers him a sip too, smugly believing that he doesn't understand a thing. Q's understands everything. Q's enters the supply room to help Yuki clean it. He playfully does a Q-to-C routine with her, not knowing that Alia was there too. When Yuki leaves the room, Alia, in Russian, repeatedly calls Q's to pay attention to her. Once their work is finished, Q's meets Kanzaki, the president of the student council. Q's tries to leave, but Kanzaki offers to treat him to the finest meal known to man as thanks. Thus, Kanzaki brings them all to a Denny's. Once more, Kanzaki and Yuki try to convince Q's to join the student council, but he refuses. However, Q's is surprised to learn that Yuki isn't the only one running for student council president at the next election. Alia is too. After eating, Q's walks Alia home and asks her about her plans to run for president. When Q's returns home, he discovers Yuki reading a shoujo manga. Yuki is actually his little sister, cute, cheeky, and an otaku. If she had orange hair, this would be a different anime entirely. They discuss the manga Yuki is reading, which leads her to passionately declare that the romantic tension is even better if the characters are blood-related siblings, and she's 100% right. The next morning, Yuki wakes up Q's by pouncing on him in bed. Q's, like the ungrateful older brother he is, tells her to get off. The two head to the mall to watch a movie and go shopping, but they quickly notice that Alia is following them. While Q's tries to escape, Yuki approaches Alia and invites her to join them for lunch. Q's warns Alia that they'll be eating at a spicy restaurant, but she's confident she can take it. How spicy could it be? Yuki takes them to a restaurant called Hell's Cauldron. Q's notices that Alia is visibly nervous, so he orders the least spicy thing on the menu for her. Alia comments that Yuki's outfit seems more boyish than usual, and Yuki reveals that she was in Q's house this morning and he lent his shirt. Yuki almost explodes, but luckily their food arrives. Alia takes a bite, and as expected, cannot take the heat, but she pretends that everything is fine. Yuki suggests that Alia put some devil's tears in her bowl to make it spicier. Q sees the look on Yuki's face. She's enjoying this. Alia puts one drop in her bowl, takes a bite, and nearly dies. Afterwards, Q's joins Alia as Yuki has some other business to do. To cheer her up, Q's treats her to some ice cream. He then asks about her plans to run for president and informs her that she'd need a vice president to run with. She mumbles in Russian that she wouldn't mind if he joined her. Q's joins Alia on a shopping trip. Alia, feeling that Q's isn't taking her ambitions to run for president seriously, resolves to stun and embarrass him with her fashionable good looks. She tries on an off-shoulder dress, but Q's compliments her effortlessly. Alia, wanting to outdo Yuki, tries on a variety of other outfits to extort more words of praise. Eventually, she shows off a bold and revealing outfit, unaware that Yuki had arrived. Mortified, Yuki retreats into the changing room. On the train ride home, Q's and Yuki get off at the same stop, which makes Alia wonder why. Alia returns home to the waiting arms of her sister Masha. Masha senses that something is wrong, and she learns that Alia met Q's and Yuki together. Masha proposes that Alia has feelings for Q's, and even though it's obvious that she does, Alia denies it, claiming that she and Q's are just friends. Masha doubts this, considering that Alia hates people who don't take things seriously, and the fact that Q's looks like he eats sandwiches with a Great Dane. 6 years ago, in Vladivostok, Russia, Alia and her classmates received an assignment to research the local shops with the promise of an excellence award to whoever has the best work. Alia, hoping to get that award, gives it her best effort. However, her group mates don't take the assignment seriously, leading her to lose the coveted award. So maybe you should start doing that assignment, unless you want little Alia to cry. A few years later, Alia transfers to Japan and meets Q's. She judges him for being lazy, unathletic, laid-back, and for exuding stoner energy. History repeats itself when the class prepares for the school festival. While most of the students put in the effort, Alia feels as though she's the only one giving it her all, as she repeatedly injures herself while sewing costumes for the class haunted house. Q's notices, so he secures the help of the sewing club and the overnight use of the boarding house. He tries to tell her that she can't do everything herself, but this only upsets her. Thanks to Q's actions, the class becomes motivated to work. The haunted house is a resounding success, and they win the Excellence Award. During the festival bonfire dance, Alia thanks Q's and offers to do him a favor as thanks. He asks if he can call her by her nickname, Alia, mostly so he can show off to everyone. Several guys approach Alia to dance, but Q's takes her hand and whisks her away. The next day, Q's wakes up from his usual nap, and Alia wonders where that cool guy she saw yesterday went. Alia concludes her story, and Masha finds it quite romantic. She compares it to her interaction with a young boy named Sa, whom she was smitten with in her youth. The next day, Q's drops by the student council to fill in for Yuki, who is sick. Masha acquaints herself with him, but she finds him oddly familiar. Wow, it'd be a really big twist if Sa turned out to be him. Nevertheless, Q's assists Masha with shopping for the student council. Q's finds Masha rather free-spirited. She picks up essentials for the student council like a plush animal resembling Alia. When Masha asks Q's for his input regarding what sort of tea she should get, it somehow triggers Q's childhood trauma of his parents' divorce. Noticing him in distress, Masha comforts Q's, but she accidentally pours hot tea all over his back. At least he's warm now. Q's and Masha return to the council room with their purchased supplies. Kanzaki is relieved to have sent Q's along with Masha, otherwise she would have filled the room with more plushies than an e-girl's room. Once again, Kanzaki tries to convince Q's to join, revealing that he was once an unattractive, overweight freshman. However, he worked on himself to impress his crush Chisaki, the current vice president. So maybe you should stop playing League of Legends and touch some grass. Kanzaki and Masha reassure Q's that the mere will to join the council is enough. Q's finally promises to consider their offer. Q's notices that Alia is not here. Kanzaki explains that he sent her to mediate between the baseball and soccer clubs for the right to use the field, as Chisaki is currently busy dealing with the kendo club. Q's leaves, intending to check how Alia is doing. Alia struggles to mediate between the two clubs. When she suggests that the baseball club use the old field near the river so the soccer club can use the main school field, it causes an even bigger argument. Unable to find a compromise, Alia breaks down and silently mutters in Russian for someone to help her. Right on cue, Q's steps in. Q's was originally going to leave her alone, but after hearing her cry for help, he decided to intervene. Q's cleverly mediates between the two clubs, repeating Alia's suggestion for the baseball club to use the old field, but also adding the condition that some of the soccer club personnel help the smaller baseball club. The manager of the soccer club swiftly agrees, and the baseball club members are happy to have cute managers help them out. With crisis averted, they all go their separate ways. Alia is impressed that Q's was able to manage all that himself, and she discovers that Q's took advantage of the fact that the soccer club manager and baseball club captain are dating. In the end, everyone wins. The soccer club gets the main field, and the baseball club gets some cute girls. They run into Kanzaki, and Q's deduces that this was all an elaborate ruse to get him to join, and it works. Q's agrees to join the student council. On their way out, Alia asks Q's if he intends to support Yuki in the upcoming election. When Alia shows her resolve in running for president anyway, Q's switches sides and pledges to support her instead. While sealing their new partnership, Alia admits in Russian that she likes Q's. Now Q's knows too. Alia senses that Q's was thinking of another woman, so she slaps him. He gets what he deserves. Q's walks Alia home, and to make up for her earlier slap, she kisses him on the cheek. but because Q's face is still numb, he couldn't tell if it was her lips or her cheek that touched him. That evening, Alia denies her own feelings for Q's, perhaps dooming this anime to go on for another 24 episodes. When Masha arrives home, she remarks that Alia better act quickly before another girl swoops in and takes Q's. It's her. Masha's that girl. Q's regrets all the embarrassing things he said, and he wonders if Alia is feeling the same way. As he sets these blossoming feelings aside, he arrives home, just to walk in on Yuki as she steps out of the— It was bound to happen eventually. Q's is quick to realize that Yuki planned this whole interaction for the sole reason that they've yet to have the walk-in on your little sister event. Q's matches Yuki's freak by declaring he's only turned on by subtle acts of revealing skin. Yuki invades Q's room and asks him if he joined the student council. He admits that he joined to help Alia become president, and Yuki laments the fact that her C-cups lost to Alia's E-cups. Yuki otherwise takes the news well. Q's also swears that he's not doing this out of spite. Yuki welcomes this bit of sibling rivalry, though she remarks that Q's can always come back to her once he's bored of his so-called affair with Alia. The next morning, Q's wakes up peacefully, and he assumes that Yuki is taking their new rivalry seriously. However, the moment he gets off his bed, Yuki's arm jolts out from underneath and grabs him. When Q sees that she's stuck there, he tries to smother her to death, just like any good brother would do. Later, Alia begins to see Q's in a new light. She's attracted, even. However, over the course of the day, she notices that Q's doesn't seem like himself. During P class, Alia scores the game-winning point of her volleyball game, but she observes Q's getting hit in the back of his head. Alia approaches him afterwards to check on his injuries. Q's also begins to see Alia in a more attractive light, specifically her huge badonkers and her armpits. All for free, just like that. Q's tries to cool off, but this prompts Masha to wipe him down. Alia pulls Q's away from her and confronts him over how strange he's been acting lately. Q's reveals that he just wasn't able to eat breakfast and had a good night's sleep. Alia, realizing that she was worried for absolutely nothing, storms off. After school, Q's and a still grumpy Alia head to the council room, where they observe some members of the baseball and soccer clubs run away with their tails between their legs. Opening the door, Q's nearly dies when Vice President Chisaki mistakes him for one of the club members. Chisaki apologizes and explains that she only threatened with great physical harm, or rather convinced the club members to follow the terms of their negotiations. Kanzaki playfully pokes fun at Chisaki's brute strength, which results in them flirting in front of everyone. Fellas, is the 15th floor high enough? After a clever joke gets him back into Alia's good graces, Q's formally introduces himself to the rest of the student council, and he officially joins. As Q's concludes his introduction, Yuki asks to take Alia along for budget negotiations with the art club for their upcoming exhibition. However, Q senses that Yuki has some other ulterior motive. Sorry, Yuri lovers, it's not that motive. Yuki pulls Alia into an empty classroom and professes her love for Q's. To try and save us from a long, drawn-out romance slog, Yuki confronts Alia regarding her feelings for Q's. Alia avoids answering the question, but she declares that she won't hand Q's over to anyone. Satisfied, Yuki heads off to do her business. Meanwhile, Q's and Masha work together to sort out some documents. Q's is surprised by how capable Masha is, but is not surprised by how clumsy Chisaki is. Kanzaki tricks her into heading to the library, and he apologizes to Q's for Chisaki's behavior. Despite her demeanor, Chisaki is the best when it comes to mediating with the other clubs. During a lull in their work, Masha makes some black tea for Q's and protein powder for Kanzaki. While chatting about the customs of Russian tea and Q's general interest in Russia, Q's recalls how his mother liked black tea too. Alia and Yuki return, and Alia sits uncomfortably close to Q's. Q senses that he's in one of the most dangerous positions known to man, not the Bermuda Triangle, but a love triangle. After their meeting, Kanzaki sends the freshmen home. On their way back, Kezu senses that Yuki must have done something to upset Alia somehow. He invites her to a family restaurant, though Alia mumbles in Russian that she had wished this was a date. Alia orders a parfait and a float and asks Q's if he's dating Yuki. He denies it, and he starts discussing strategy with her to win the student council election. With more than half of the original candidates withdrawing on account of Yuki's popularity, Q's predicts that the election will boil down to a three-way between themselves, Yuki, and a third party. Alia, still distracted, messes with Q's by forcing him to take a bite of her parfait, resulting in an indirect kiss. Everyone sees this. As they sink back into their seats, Q's notices Taniyama walking outside. Q's gets back to business and states that Alia will need a strong hook if she wants a chance to win. He recounts how Kanzaki won his election against the previous president after the school newspaper documented his dramatic transformation from basement dweller to gym rat. However, their attention quickly returns to the spoon they used. Neither of them wants to use it, so Q's orders something else so they can get a new one. Alia teases him for being embarrassed over something insignificant like an indirect kiss, though she says in Russian that she wouldn't have done it with anyone else. Eventually, Q's tells Alia that she needs to make a good impression during the next general meeting by giving a speech. Noticing her eyeing his spicy meal, Q's offers her some. Alia, wanting to keep up the lie that she likes spicy food, accepts. Q's listens to his intrusive thoughts Yuki's voice and includes a whole pepper in Alia's portion. For the second time this week, Alia nearly dies. On the way home, Alia asks who Yuki might snatch for her running mate. Q suspects that it might be Taniyama, who tried running against Yuki for all 3 years of middle school. However, the next day, his conviction is shaken when Yuki brings in a female student named Ayano, who he already seems familiar with. After the meeting, Ayano, addressing Q's as her master, pulls him aside. To the surprise of no one, Q's is revealed to be the disinherited heir of the prestigious Siwu family, whose role was then passed on to Yuki. Ayano informs Q's that his grandfather is furious after learning that he is running against Yuki in the upcoming election. Ayano probes Q's for his intentions behind opposing Yuki, but after he reassures her that he harbors no ill will and asks her to take support Yuki on his behalf, Ayano leaves him in peace. Later, during class, Takeshi asks Q's what girl he prefers from the cover of a gravure magazine. Q's picks out a girl who resembles Masha. Was that the right move, chat? Takeshi and Hikaru start pressing him for more details until Alia inevitably overhears them. When Q's comments that he'd rather date someone close to him, Alia is overjoyed, but she quickly becomes upset when he adds that he prefers those with more sunny dispositions. It also doesn't help that Takeshi and Hikaru agree with him. In retaliation, Alia confiscates their magazine. Ayano reports back to Yuki and briefs her on what Q's had told her earlier. Yuki is glad to hear that Q's intends to take the election seriously, and even more so to hear that her dear brother still considers her the most important person in the world. Yuki tricks Ayano into thinking that Super M means super maid, which will surely cause some problems down the line. Back in the student council room, Alia loses miserably to Yuki in a game of cards. Kanzaki, Q's, and Chisaki observe how easy it is to read Alia's face, and conversely, they find it impossible to figure out what's going on in Masha's head. As Ayano walks over to refill their drinks, they learn that she became one of the Suwu family's retainers due to her respect for her grandparents, who were also servants. Q's reminds Ayano not to divulge too much information. Masha joins the table after being told off by Alia. When they run out of drinks, Masha volunteers to get everyone their requested beverage, but she drags Q's along with her. While they're alone, Q's confronts Masha over what he feels is her faking being an easygoing, air-headed elder sister. Masha explains that she does not want to compete with Alia nor trample on her happiness. She poses the same question to Q's, sensing that he is hiding his true capabilities. She comforts Q's by giving him a few pats on the head. Meanwhile, Taniyama confronts Alia and accuses her of using underhanded, under-the-table means of stealing Q's away from Yuki as her vice president. Q's comes along and asserts that he joined Alia of his own free will, which only offends Taniyama further. She views them both as ill-suited to run for student council, and she decides to challenge their candidacies with the ultimate aim of getting Q's kicked out of the student council. Q's and Alia regroup with Kanzaki and learn that Taniyama has filed an official motion to add a teacher's review process for joining the student council. After observing their resolve and confidence that they can win, Kanzaki gives his blessing. After class, Q's and Alia hold a strategy meeting to refute Taniyama's claims. Q's hypothesizes that Taniyama is attacking them because she believes that Q's isn't treating the election seriously. Alia feels responsible and swears to do her best at tomorrow's assembly. The next day, they meet Nonoa, Taniyama's partner. Despite being a popular, outgoing Jaru, Nonoa and Taniyama are inseparable childhood friends. Alia stands on stage as the student body's general consensus is that Taniyama will win the debate. Sensing her nervousness, Q's asks Alia if she really is an E-cup. This successfully calms her down somehow. He encourages her to picture her ideal, perfect self when she begins her speech. Taniyama takes the podium first, arguing that the student council in recent years has suffered in quality due to the unchecked power of the president to appoint whomever they want in their cabinet. She thus proposes a teacher's review to vet any prospective council members. Alia, encouraged by Q's earlier words, argues that a teacher's review would undermine the autonomy and authority that their student council has. In the first place, their school highly values student self-government. As Taniyama gives her own rebuttal, she realizes that Alia is not as easy an opponent as she had thought. Just as the students seem unsure who to support, Nonoa texts a few of her connections to remind everyone that Alia is an exchange student, and thus should know very little about their school. Alia is rattled and subsequently shuts down. Q steps in and points out to everyone that Kanzaki, a man they all currently trust, was once an overweight weeb, the kind of person who would never have been accepted by a teacher. So maybe you should start working out. Q's reasoning convinces the entire student body, prompting Taniyama to flee. Kanzaki ends the assembly, which robbed everyone of 5 minutes of their life. Alia catches up to Taniyama, who explains that Q's and Yuki were the perfect duo, so perfect, in fact, that she gave up running for student council. However, Alia ruined all that. Nano arrives and takes over, and she urges Alia to leave. Yuki, who observed the proceedings, remarks that Q's could have ended the debate anytime he wanted. Alia returns to Q's and asks him why he once served as Yuki's vice president. He admits that he only did so out of a sense of guilt, but now he is choosing to run alongside Alia out of his own free will. Alia replies in Russian that she's running with Q's because he's him and no one else. As they leave the hall, Alia asks Q's why he asked about her e-cup, and he explains that a female friend had told him as such. Alia turns around and leaves in a huff, but not before grumbling in Russian that his friend was just barely right. You can almost hear the H artists at work. Jensei, the patriarch and head of the Sue family, reminds Yuki that she cannot lose to Q's in the upcoming election. Yumi, Yuki's mother, later approaches Yuki and asks her if she and Q's are getting along well. Yuki reassures her that they are. Upon entering her room, Yuki motorboats Ayano to cheer herself up. If that doesn't cheer anyone up, nothing will. A week later, a few students approach Q's and ask him about the General Assembly. He redirects them to ask Alia instead, and with Hikaru's help, Alia manages to answer a few questions. However, Alia becomes upset when the students badmouth Taniyama for running away during the debate. Alia drags Q's to the council room and requests his help in clearing Taniyama's name. Q's agrees, but he senses that Kanzaki and Chisaki are hiding underneath the desk for some reason. Just as the mood becomes romantic, Q's calls out to the two, causing them all to go their separate ways. Q's heads to Nanoa's class and speaks to her in another empty room. She playfully asks if he's come to confess to her, as she would have said yes. Q's tells her to value herself more, and Nono exclaims that Taniyama told her the same thing. That tempting offer aside, Q's enlists Nanoa's help in clearing Taniyama's name by coming up with a rumor that she ran away during the debate for another reason. As she leaves, Q's absent-mindedly calls out Ayano's name. She and Yuki were hiding underneath the table the entire time. Yuki claims that she was spying on him, but in reality she was also pretending to have a secret clandestine meeting with Ayano, and she didn't expect Q's to actually have one. Alia spots the three of them together and jealously walks away. As Nonoa walks back to her classroom, she recalls the time that Taniyama slapped her for frivolously jumping from relationship to relationship. She returns to her friends and twists the truth, claiming that Taniyama fled the debate because she found out that Nonoa had planted people in the crowd to sow discord. To make up for earlier, Q's invites Alia to a private study session. However, Yuki and Ayano arrive unannounced and crash their studying. Though Alia grumbles in Russian that she wanted it to just be her and Q's, she reluctantly allows Yuki and Ayano to stay. While studying, Masha finds a hypnosis book that Alia had confiscated earlier. She convinces Q's to hypnotize her, and it works. Imagine the power that Q's wields. Shortly after, Q's dispels the hypnosis. Alia is understandably skeptical that Q's actually has hypnosis powers, so she challenges him to hypnotize her too. As expected, Alia falls under his control, but Masha is also inadvertently affected, probably because she's an idiot. Yuki takes Ayano and Q's suggestions on what to make the two girls do and instructs them to strip their bodies and minds bare. This surely won't have any negative or unintended effects. Almost immediately, there are negative and unintended effects. Though things start innocently enough, Alia and Masha eventually start removing their clothes. Luckily, Chisaki arrives just in time. She uses some jetty mind tricks to dispel the hypnosis, and when the girls wake up, they realize the sordid state they're in. Q struggles to focus on studying for the upcoming exams, not wanting to drag Alia down. However, he unexpectedly receives a phone call from her. Alia checks in on Q's, knowing that he can't study properly by himself. To motivate him, she offers to grant him one non-illegal wish should he manage to place in the top 30 in the batch. Otherwise, he must grant her one non-illegal wish. Q's reveals that he knows her birthday is on November 7th, and he shares that his is on April 9th. Q's is pleased that she had the presence of mind to check on him, but in reality, Alia was frightened while watching The Ring. The only things Russians aren't afraid of are bears, vodka, and invasions during the winter. However, Alia is upset that Q's didn't tell her his birthday sooner. 5 days later, Q's invites Alia to talk about their closing remarks for the election. He's also noticed that since their phone call, she stopped mumbling her feelings in Russian. Eventually, he discovers that she was upset that he didn't invite her to his birthday party, even though he hasn't celebrated one since elementary school. She claims that in Russia, it is a socially important event. Q's invites Alia out to celebrate his birthday together, and she happily accepts. Q's meets Alia, who wears a stunning off-shoulder dress. As they walk to the restaurant, Q's notices everyone staring at her. Alia shrugs it off. She's been hit on a lot in the past, so she usually makes bothersome men go away by only speaking in Russian. Upon arriving at the restaurant, Q's brings up their strategy for their closing election remarks. Following their speech, the student body will judge them by making a round of applause. The louder the applause, the better. Q's hopes that they'll speak first to salvage their reputation, as Yuki will certainly command the most attention. When their food arrives, they celebrate Q's birthday. Alia is also aware of Q's involvement in the rumor that Nanoa spread, though she isn't upset. She thanks Q's for his help, and not only that, but she starts flirting with him hard. First, she fork feeds him some meat before using the same fork to eat her own food. Next, she gives him a decorative mug, then teasing him by claiming she has a matching mug at home. You'll never have a cute, half-Russian girlfriend. Why even live? The following day at the student council room, Kanzaki reveals that he plans to introduce their new summer uniforms after the election closing remarks. Masha serves them some tea, but Kanzaki soon leaves for the parent-teacher conference. As Masha prepares to clean up, Q's volunteers to help her. Q's apologizes to Masha regarding the hypnosis incident, but she isn't overly upset. She's just glad that the worst thing she did was pat him on the head. But knowing that he saw her in her underwear, she reminds him to be a gentleman. Upon returning to the student council room, Yuki demands that he give her some love, as he's been spending most of his time with Alia. Q's gives her what she wants, but she ends up making fun of him instead. That's siblings for you. Q's receives a phone call from his paternal grandfather Tomohisa, who shows up for his parent-teacher conference wearing a pure white suit. While waiting outside the teacher's lounge, they discuss Q's father Kaiutaro, who is currently working with the British embassy. When Tomohisa sees Alia, his Russian-obsessed brain springs into action and asks her if she'd like to marry Q's. They also meet Akemi, Alia's mother, who later asks Alia the same question. Following Q's parent-teacher conference, he runs into his mother Yumi, whom he seems to be on deathly bad terms with. Q's has a nightmare of how he tried his best to impress his mother, only to be shunned. When he wakes up, he finds that he has a fever. Later that day, Alia shows up at his doorstep to take care of him. She initially claims that Yuki asked her to come inside, but later admits in Russian that this is a lie. Alia wants him bad. Alia follows Q's to his room, muttering in Russian that it smells like a guy. She offers to cook him either porridge or borscht, but Q's, like any sane person, doesn't want to wait 4 hours for her to cook borscht. Alia borrows his kitchen and is happy when she sees that Q's has been using the mug she gave him. Alia returns and serves Q's porridge, and she learns that he lives alone with his father. Interestingly, Q's claims that he has no mother. After eating, Q's falls asleep. Q's wakes up from his nap at 8 p.m. He's sweaty, his phone battery is at 12%, and slightly delirious. He finds Ayano and Alia in the living room, and Ayano explains that Yuki instructed her to take care of Q's, so she sends Alia home. Alia appears distressed when Ayano mentions tomorrow, but Alia concedes and leaves. Ayano serves Q's the borscht that Alia made for him, and he quickly falls asleep after rejecting further care. Q's wakes up late the next morning and decides to skip school. However, after noticing something strange with his medicine, he demands to see the packaging. As he expected, Ayano was giving him medicine knowing that it would make him drowsy. Sensing that something is amiss, Q's rushes to school and realizes that Yuki had planned an elaborate trap for him. Alia recounts how the day before Yuki asked her to come to Q's house. Immediately after, Yuki asked her to come as a guest on the school radio show, and Alia reluctantly agreed. Yuki suddenly showed a crooked, cruel smile. She openly admits to wanting to crush both Alia and Q's before the election even begins. Alia stands her ground, confident that she can defend herself against anything Yuki throws at her. However, it turns out that Yuki planned the whole thing. The next day, before the radio show, Yuki suddenly apologizes to Yuki and explains that she's running for president for the sake of her family and her once excellent older brother. She asks Alia why she's running for president, which rattles her. When the radio show begins, Alia is too shaken to properly speak, humiliating her in front of the entire student body. Q's calms Yuki down and explains that Yuki's real goal was only to unsettle her. Yuki's main attack won't come until the closing ceremony. Q's too flashes the same crooked smile as his sister, which Alia seems to like. Alia is confirmed a freak. Still, Alia is disheartened that her reason for running for president isn't as good as Yuki's, but Q's reassures her that her reason is as good as any. He reaffirms his resolve to help her win, which Alia teasingly compares to a confession of love. Nonoa and Taniyama enter the room to apologize for their actions during the previous assembly. Taniyama intends to drop out of the election, but instead Q's enlists her and Nonoa's help in bringing down Yuki. He is no longer aiming for a draw, he's aiming for absolute crushing victory. Q's and Alia go over their final rehearsal for the closing speech. Sensing that Alia is a little nervous to speak in front of a large crowd, Q's teaches her a little trick on how to calm down. Yuki and Ayano step on stage. Q's tells Alia to be careful of Yuki's real face going forward, though Alia affirms that she doesn't think of Yuki any differently. In contrast, Q's visibly intimidates Yuki and threatens to crush her. Kanzaki, Masha, and Shisaki enter to conduct some final preparations. To decide the order of the closing speech, they toss a coin. When Alia calls the coin toss wrong, Yuki is given the right to choose which order she'll speak in. After much thought, Yuki opts to speak first. The next day, after the sitting student council gives their parting message before the summer break, Yuki heads on stage to give her closing remarks. She garners support for her upcoming presidential bid like a true politician, by promising to fulfill all their wishes and desires and making vague promises. Next, Ayano goes on stage to express her support for Yuki, furthering her appeal. Q's gives Alia an encouraging nod. Like a certain hero would say, "It's your turn." Alia walks on stage, though the students are already treating as though Yuki is the winner. However, as Alia begins her speech, the confusion on the students' faces are as clear as day. Alia speaks entirely in Russian, puzzling everyone. This turns out to be all part of their plan. Alia pretends that this was all a mishap, which lightens the mood in her favor. Alia then proceeds with her real speech, which is refreshingly honest, raw, and frank. Alia admits she lacks the experience to become president, but she asserts that her work ethic, continuous self-improvement, and trust in others will pull her through. Alia exits the stage to an impressive applause, and she gives way to Q's, who promises victory upon his return. Q's heads on stage and makes his classmates laugh with his trademark brand of comedy. He declares that Alia can be clumsy at times, but praises her genuine, hardworking nature. He considers the most important factor for a leader is their ability to attract people, and to prove it, he reveals that Taniyama and Nonoa have promised to join their cabinet should they win next year's election. Yuki's eyes widen. She realizes that she's been beaten. As Q's Alia, Taniyama, and Nonoa reaffirm their victory, Yuki admits defeat, but just this time. Later, Q sees that he is only ranked 33rd in the batch, just shy of meeting his promised rank. Alia was certain that he'd succeed, so she didn't think of anything she'd like him to do. As a compromise, Q suggests that they call each other by their first names, so Alia starts calling him Masachika. Outside, Q's invites Alia to see each other over the summer break. Alia asks Q's in Russian to look forward. As he does, Alia happily accepts his invitation.